Here at Friedrich Park, we see clear evidence of chemical weathering on little rocks of limestone here. This happens due to carbonic acid, I believe, and rain kind of mixing and weathering the rock up. You can see that on it. It's definitely a little gray and dark as a result of this chemical weathering. And you can see when we look under, it's clearly a different color, kind of light white orangey, as this part has not been affected by the rain, which would even catalyze this reaction. So here we have a very clear reaction of chemical weathering. And I'm at Friedrich. These are all over the parks. To expand on my previous point, you can clearly see that some rocks have not had that exposure to the atmosphere enough to create the carbonation and chemical weathering. So that's pretty cool. Here is an example of a better example of biotic weathering, as the tree roots have sort of grown under this massive piece of limestone that's kind of hidden by all this extra stuff on top. And you can see that it kind of ruptured through and it broke off a couple pieces of limestone. You can see under it's pretty smooth. We have a kind of an area where it's like almost floating above the ground due to this. And this, I mean, obviously we can see that the top is carbonation weathering took place here. And you can kind of tell it's sort of mass deposition, because this rock clearly kind of connected together as a puzzle piece, but the roots must have grown under it and over time had kind of broke it apart, and it kind of, all the deposition kind of sits right here along the bottom of the tree. So neatly enough, I actually found an example of ephemeral streams and a Nick Point kind of in the same area, but I guess for starters, here we have a Nick Point. As you can see, I'm kind of low onto the ground, but the elevation is clearly higher at this part. And when it rains, I think it's coming down this stream channel. And the rock here feels kind of way smoother than the ones on the bottom. The bottom, you can tell it's still very rough, as the water is not hitting it at all, really. And it's not carbonated nearly as much as the buddies up here on top, right? So the water is definitely softer here. I would say it's because all the rocks and deposition it carries is kind of maybe roughing up the surface a bit, kind of resulting in this carbonated, way smoother texture than the ones on the bottom. As you can see, you kind of have these little rocks that it's been depositing when it comes down from this stream channel. You can see these little tiny boys back here, right? That's pretty cool. It's pretty neat. But I guess to continue, let me get out of this area. It kind of leads under this bridge all the way to sort of an ephemeral stream. So going down here, you can clearly see we have an ephemeral stream. I don't think it's a meandering one, but it's definitely one that's that only kind of happens when it rains, because there's no real point where it's just constantly coming down. We are in San Antonio, so it doesn't rain too much, but you can see in these ephemeral streams we have multiple examples of limestone rocks, but kind of just a long pathway where it's only going to fill up once it rains, kind of going back down that way, maybe looping around the other way as well. And back over here, that Nick Point I found, I just wanted to add, I personally don't see any trees kind of inside the cracks. You can see that it's kind of separating here through just natural deposition. Very, very small point here where you can see that the Nick Point will probably eventually move a little higher. You see these roots right here that I'm trying to pull out. I think that's going to eventually like cut this part off, and we're going to kind of move this back a little bit. And to add on to that, before I move on, I didn't really find many of them, but I did find a marble-sized hole, like Professor mentioned. And this is from the carbonic acid and the rainwater in the atmosphere kind of reacting with it and creating this sort of small hole here. You can see maybe little smaller ones, but this is probably the most obvious example of it I could find around me. And right next to the Nick Point I had observed, I think I found another form of ephemeral stream kind of running down this way. But if not, I did find a process, definitely biological again, where we have this tree growing under, but it's not sort of breaking the rock apart, as I think it's separating it from the soil itself. And I think when it rains, I think the water over time kind of pushes it all down there, and you can see a very clear separation from this elevation towards the very bottom where I could probably stick my hand there and forever. So I think maybe it's a sort of soil erosion where water intermittently kind of just brings it down and pushes it all the way in there. And you can see the roots itself kind of digging itself through the rock, kind of separating the land from this sort of part of it right here at the very, very corner. You can see the separation between the rock and the land itself, probably caused by this little tree right here and the roots among it. So along from that previously found nick point, we have a long rock wall that's kind of separated into two parts. Aforementioned that soil erosion, where the water kind of gets in here and pushes all the way down and separates it. We have a lot of cases of biological weathering. You can see the tree roots kind of going in between the rock itself and separating it just a little bit. If I can get a little closer, you see this reaction right here. Pretty stiff root right here, and it's kind of separating these rocks. You can tell because they're getting smaller and smaller. I'm sure in due time they're gonna separate. You can already see it's kind of moving itself a little bit.
Yeah,